Hello and welcome to ET Markets Crypto TV presented by CoinSwitch Kuber. I'm Miloni Bhatt. Today, our focus, proof of work versus proof of stake and why should you care? Yes, sounds very complicated. Our aim is to demystify cryptocurrencies and its universe, but we're going to get there. Now, say for instance, you write a check, 100 rupees to the water department. There are two entities in this transaction, you and the water department. Now, a third party, a bank, comes into play. It debits your account and credits it to the water department. Both you and the water department have to trust this third party to do the right thing. That is, take your money and give it to the water department. There's centralized control over everything to ensure that everything runs smoothly. Now, not so with many crypto which run on distributed ledger and decentralized tech. With Bitcoin and other digital currencies, everyone has a copy of the ledger, blockchain. So no one has to trust in third parties because anyone can directly verify the information that is written. But the lack of a central authority responsible for verifying transactions also presents a challenge, ensuring that you don't spend the same crypto twice or validating a transaction. In crypto, there are two broad approaches like proof of work and proof of stake that validate a transaction. What are they? What exactly do they mean? What are their benefits? What are their drawbacks? All of that in this episode. Now, we have with us Mr. Ajeet Khurana. He's the former CEO of ZepPay with previous stints as CEO of the Business Incubator at IIT Bombay, former advisor to Kalari Capital, among others. Ajeet Khurana is currently working on a new startup in the crypto space. Mr. Khurana, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
So before we understand these terms, proof of work, proof of stake, could you explain to us what the term consensus algorithm means in crypto?
Because there is no central authority, because there is no company called Bitcoin. For example, if I were to use Bitcoin as an example of cryptocurrency, because you don't have recourse to go to somebody if there is a dispute, what has to happen is that all the people in the Bitcoin network, which is the people who are sending the money, receiving the money, in the example you gave, as well as all the other people who are participating in the network, decide what transactions are correct and what transactions are not. For instance, right now, I'm looking at my computer. On this computer, I can download the entire Bitcoin software and Bitcoin database. I can go to my address, which would be the equivalent of an account in a bank, and change the number of Bitcoin that I hold from 1 to 100. And indeed, my copy of the database will say that. However, this doesn't mean that I truly own 99 extra Bitcoin, because the rest of the Bitcoin network will not be in consensus with my belief. The process of creating consensus, I'm sorry to make this sound a little jargon driven, but this is at the heart of it. The process of creating this consensus in a distributed fashion, which is independent people coming to the same conclusion, is at the heart of blockchain technology. And that is the technological miracle of Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain in general.
Right. Now, to understand proof of work, proof of stake, we need to get into what is mining in crypto. So can you tell us a little bit about it? What it is, why is it important, why was it conceived?
Okay. I will go back to the example, which was actually a very good example of you writing a 100 rupee check to the water department. We will complicate a little bit and also assume that the water department has an account in another bank, not in your bank. So I write a check. It has to somehow, through a series of messages, I giving my bank a message, and through the check, that bank passing a message to another bank who then credits it. This process is laborious. It involves
Hmm.
hardware, processes, people, software who occupy space, they consume energy, they require training, and all of those things. They require audits, they require checks and balances. They need to follow rule by somebody sitting on top of all of this, which would be the central banker. In India, it is the Reserve Bank of India. Now, what happens is all of these people, the entire system that came into action when I wrote my check, all the way up to the money reaching the destination, all of these people, I would loosely club them and say they are the authenticators and validators and executors of my transaction. Executors because they led it there, authenticators because they have to send my check, they have to see I am valid, that person is valid, and validators because validators come in and see whether the authenticators have done a good job, because there could be errors. We can't randomly have checks going in wrong places. This entire infrastructure of authenticator, validator, and executor is missing in cryptocurrency. So somebody or something has to play that role. That role of all the things that I described is played by miners. The word mining actually is an oversimplification, because somebody someday said that cryptocurrency is, or Bitcoin is, like digital gold. So to carry forward that analogy of gold, they also came up with the analogy of miners. While it helps understand the process, it also creates confusion in the mind of people sometimes. But like I said, it is these miners who validate transactions, verify them, and then eventually make sure they get executed.
Right. So then, can you explain how the proof of work model works?
Excellent. Now that we have established what miners do, how do they do it? For
Hmm.
example, do they physically, again to carry forward the analogy, receive the check? Do they verify it against a database that the signature is correct? So these are the processes that a bank would follow. There may be more than one process, as you can imagine. Some banks may want to physically hold the check, some may be happy seeing images, some may be using a signature scanning software as opposed to a human being. So there's always more than one way to do things. Likewise, in the world of cryptocurrency, for miners to operate and do the processes that we described, there is more than one way. There might actually be a few dozen, but proof of work and proof of stake account for, in percentage terms, volume wise, literally so big a percentage, more than 99%, like 99.999, you could call it 100. But in terms of, let us say, the coins that use those, it's probably around 98 to 99%. So these are two methods in which this process, for example, assisting my wealth, which could be in the form of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, to reach you, these are the two most major methods being used.
So what are mining pools then?
Okay, what happens is that since mining, for the purpose of the network, mining validates, authorizes, and executes transactions. But
Hmm.
hey, that is the benefit that the network is getting. What
Hmm.
am I as a miner getting? Because I am not a consultant, service
Hmm.
provider, employee. I'm using my hardware, software, time, and most specifically, especially in the case of proof of work, my energy, which is electricity. What is in it for me? What is in it for me is that there is rewards that either you will necessarily get, or you will through a lottery process get. That means either some people will get a big chunk of reward, as in the case of Bitcoin, and in some other cases, everybody who participates gets very tiny rewards. So that
Right.
is a reward that I get. However, because cryptocurrency prices have gone so high, let us say from the 1 cent or less than 1 cent, Bitcoin is, 40s of thousands and 50s of thousands, depending on when somebody is watching this video. What has happened is a large number of people have started participating with a desire to earn that reward. Now, the number of people and the resources have become so much that the likelihood that I, using this laptop, will ever be able to make a reward has gone down very much. Like theoretically, the probability is so little that if I use a laptop, it would take thousands or tens of thousands of years for me to win the lottery. Just like, if you have 10,000 lotteries, it would take you like, more than 5,000 attempts to have a reasonable chance at winning that lottery. So what smaller people do is they club together their resources. So me and you decided
Hmm.
we will, combined our resources and do it. But if either one of us gets the reward, we will divide it by two. Now extend this two to 200 and 2,000 and 20,000. This then becomes a mining pool. People who put together their resources, let's call it computing resources, and together try to mine it, such that if any one of them gets it, then in the proportion of the resources that they brought in, they will share the reward. This is the concept of a mining pool.
Mr. Khurana, it said that proof of work has a negative impact on the environment. Can you explain that a bit?
Correct. What I will do first is I will go one step before that
Yeah.
to evaluate that if something has a negative impact, why would you do it in the first place, and how is
Hmm.
proof of work different than proof of stake?
Stake.
So when you are doing the process of, let's just go back to the banking example. Suppose there was one clerk in one of these two banks who said, this check works, transfer the money, right?
Hmm.
This would be the most efficient because only one person was required, but also probably having a higher degree of error coming into it because there was no cross verification. The receiving bank didn't check it at all, only the sending bank checked it, etc. So there is usually a, a contradiction or an opposition of what constitutes high accuracy and reliability and what constitutes greater efficiency. So if you want to be very efficient, you may actually sacrifice on quality. And if you want to have great quality, you may sacrifice on efficiency. So proof of work, which at one point was the only form of authentication, this is very important for your viewers to know, because it was largely considered infallible. And that is infallible for two reasons. Number one, if somebody, so in the digital world, you say everything can be hacked, nothing has foolproof security. And I would agree with those slogans. The fact is that if somebody tried to play around with a proof of work system, the only people who are likely to succeed are the ones who have the most resources they have deployed
Yes.
into mining, which means that they are also the ones who are going to lose the most if the network has an error. So that means the only person who can rob my house is myself. Effectively, it is that. And frankly, who does not want my house to be robbed? Well, many people, but most so myself. So proof of work is not just a technological miracle, but it's also a socio-economic miracle because it aligns interests in a way that either you don't have the capability to do it. If you have the capability to do it, there is no incentive for you to do it. This worked beautifully for some time. Then the price of Bitcoin, specifically Bitcoin now, kept going up. Large number of people came in, and it started seeming impossible for the common person to participate in proof of work at all. And it seemed like only the guys with the biggest computers would do it, which goes against the ethos and the sentiment with which we participate in a decentralized network like Bitcoin. So other methods came in, several others: proof of space, uh, proof of memory, proof of bunch of other things. And proof of stake become a very, very common and acceptable substitute, because what it does not say that, oh, you want to authenticate this transaction, run more number of computers for more number of hours, performing more number of computations. I'm describing proof of work. Instead, hold more amount of the same token that you are going to authenticate. So if I want to authenticate a ABCXYZ token, which also proof of stake, I need to first hold that token with me. Then I contribute my resources. So it does not, if the network has more people, it does not require more and more computing power as proof of work does. Instead,
You
it
need
requires,
more of the same token.
you need to hold more and more, which means, by again, much like a proof of work, where if you own more computers, you have more power. Here, if you own more token, you have more power. But because you don't have to run more computers, it becomes more energy efficient. Having said that, it becomes, some people would argue, as in, I know this is controversial in the world of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, some people would argue that inherently proof of stake has a lower degree of security than proof of work. Some others would say, no, there you need more computing resources, here you need more tokens. This led to coming of proof of stake, which is a more energy efficient.
Right. So, this entire debate around the energy consumption, do you see? But also, you described that there are certain shortcomings with proof of stake. For instance, I would say there is a shortcoming. The first shortcoming is inclusion, in the sense that only if I hold crypto, a particular crypto which I want to authenticate, can I actually participate. So it is exclusionary by nature. Uh, going back to proof of work, apart from this tremendous energy consumption, what are the other drawbacks of proof of work?
Uh, so there are three things you have said, though your question has been one. One, you talked about exclusionary. So here's the thing: if any of this was black and white, frankly, conclusions would have been reached. Some people say that proof of stake is exclusionary because you have to have the token. A similar argument could be made that proof of work is exclusionary because you won't have to invest a lot of infrastructure and energy. Likewise, you talk of energy. I hope we'll talk about that, because I think people don't necessarily get why the discussion of energy disappears for some time and then reappears. There's actually a logical reason. But now, answering your question specifically about, sorry, you asked me about why is proof of work.
No, what are the other challenges with
Okay,
proof of work model?
very nice. If I have to participate in a proof of work system, now I'm referring to myself as a miner. As a transmitter, frankly, you don't care what went inside. Just like if you click money on your digital wallet, and no, I'm not referring to a crypto digital wallet, you don't necessarily care what technology they used to reach. Was it UPI? Was it a payment wallet? The money reached my destination, so it's fine. So as a remitter, I may not care, but as a miner, in a proof of work situation, my costs of hardware are all upfront. Just to give you an example, if I were to participate in a proof of work system for a 2-year period. And why is it 2 year? Is because that is the time in which the mining hardware tends to become largely obsolete. So that's why I bought it. I ran it for 2 years. It will still run, but it will be very inefficient. So in these 2 years, roughly 30% of my expenditure would be on the hardware, and roughly 70% of my expenditure would be on electricity. On internet, close to zero. And if I am not attributing any cost to my time, we will exclude that also. So that means most a 30%, and this 30% hardware cost has to be spent on day zero, right? That makes it formidable for many people to participate in the system. Proof of stake also requires you to have those coins upfront. But if I participate in proof of stake, I purchase, let's say, 10 lakh rupees worth of coins so that I can do it. But if I don't like it, next moment I can sell those coins. There's a market for those. If I purchase hardware, I cannot dispose of my hardware, if at all. Right. So one, it is very prohibitive to start a proof of work thing, which keeps people away. And second thing is, pretty much like I said, since the hardware becomes obsolete, what does that mean? It means that it becomes increasingly energy inefficient. So people continue to run these inefficient hardware, and thereby worsening the energy situation of proof of work networks.
Right. And proof of stake improves upon it. What are the other shortcomings that proof of stake improves over proof of work?
I think that this would be the fundamental difference. In addition, because the proof of work requires a lot of hardware to come in, while proof of stake which also has hardware, but its primary engine is a digital asset. Digital assets can move fast. You can change things. You can program things. Hardware is inherently after production. It has a very limited programming ability. So things could potentially move, change, and evolve faster in a proof of stake system. Please note, I'm answering this in the architecture. I'm saying this is possible. I'm not saying this is happening. I'm saying it's possible.
Okay. It is possible. So when will it happen?
No, it will happen when people want it to happen. For example, even in the proof of work system of Bitcoin, a lot of people may not know that the Bitcoin that we call Bitcoin today is not the same Bitcoin that started. I'll just give you one very interesting and easy to understand example. When you sign a transaction, a signature would be what in usual terms we call a password. Today, you can have a multi-sig system. That means to access my digital wallet, I could say that 3 people need to sign it. Only then it will go through, right? When Bitcoin started, it was not multi-sig. So even a proof of work based system such as Bitcoin can evolve. It isn't as if it's like a stone which cannot be programmed. In proof of stake, because all digital, theoretically such improvements could happen faster. And the reason they don't happen much is because they are pretty decent to begin with. But I must point out before we start reaching the end of this conversation will not be complete unless we can address the controversy of the energy consumption of proof of work, which I believe that people don't fully understand.
Delve into it, sir.
Yeah. So it's very interesting that there will come sporadic periods of time when the entire universe seems to go a flame, and they might say that, oh, you know what, the energy consumption is unacceptable. It's more than that of several countries and stuff. And then this discussion dies down. It is not just that this is a news cycle that it comes and goes. There is a reason why at some points of time the network actually becomes far, far less energy efficient than at other times. And this, if some people understand, they'll say, you know what, that means this is not a perpetual problem. What happens is that suppose the price of Bitcoin is at a certain level, and I use Bitcoin as an example of all proof of work systems, and it suddenly goes up, like it goes up 30-40% in a month. Now what happens is that the process of mining has suddenly become very rewarding, right? So people will start using inefficient hardware. They will start mining at locations where electricity price is very high, where electricity is scarce. That means they will not be as sensitive to using clean, renewable, low price surplus energy, which should actually be used, because it has suddenly, as a spike, become very remunerative, right? So this happens when the price spikes up. In many other cases, either the price is dropping, or the price is, even if rising, it's rising at a very stable or very slow pace, such as, let's say, 1%, 2% a month. Now, in these situations, the reward associated with mining gets very wafer thin. So those people who were using expensive electricity can no longer afford it, they turn off their machines. Those people who were using inefficient hardware can no longer make a profit, they turn it off. And actually, the Bitcoin network at that point becomes far more energy efficient. So, in periods where we see a spike of reward, which means the rise of price of Bitcoin, yes, a lot of energy gets wasted, but that doesn't happen all the while. As in the last 18 months, it has happened twice, and coincidentally, both times in the November period following that a few months. So we were at 67,000 dollars on November of 21, and that causes people to rush in. Uh, but you could argue that even if it is not energy inefficient, isn't it consuming energy? And isn't that itself a load on the environment? Well, at that level, the answer is yes, but you should know that everything consumes energy. When I send money by PayPal, MoneyGram, Visa network, banking network, UPS, UPI, IMPS, all of them have an energy footprint. So to say that just because there is an energy footprint, you would have to shut down all these things. What you have to do is compare one method of transmission with another method and see which is more efficient. And in periods when prices are not spiking, proof of work offers a pretty reasonably competitive energy consumption to other methods where we don't check. For example, when I sent you some money on my NEFT, what was the energy footprint of that? We just don't ask that question because we are not challenging the existence of net banking. So that, I think, creates a false equivalence.
So, but in this entire conversation is the fact that banking right now is very widespread. Crypto essentially is a very tiny community. People who deal with crypto transactions, they're smaller compared to people who use the entire financial system or the banking system. So, I think accurately also that can't be compared because there are many, many, many more people who utilize banking services as versus those who utilize crypto for
May,
transaction.
may I just put in a point? Let's go back to when we only could use cash and check or other such negotiable instruments, but no net banking. And net banking had just entered. So it was in its first few months. We could at that point argue that the proportion of people using net banking or digital banking is negligible compared to the people who use cash and checks. But if we had held this against net banking, then we would not have seen the vibrant digital payment system that India has, which is one of the best in the world. So you are right
Point
about
taken.
the state of crypto, but that is because it's at the beginning stages.
Okay. I want to go back to the proof of stake model. How do we trust validators that they are accurately validating a transaction in the proof of stake model?
So there are two reasons to believe it, and that would also explain why you have not come across any scandalous forgery or fraud when it comes to validators. One is that to have a robust validation system, you necessarily need a large number of validators, because what happens is, just imagine that at any point of time, uh, let's put it this way: banks have ATM machines. ATM
Right.
machines are filled with currency notes by human beings, right? So what if the person who is filling that machine takes it and runs away, right? Or for that matter, there are people who can code and open an ATM machine. Typically, from the last time I studied it, which was about a decade ago, 8 people have to participate and enter a password to be able to do that. Yes, if all of them act in concert and then try to take money away, they can actually rob a ATM machine. Some bank employee could rob it, which is why you have 8 people doing it and not one. Likewise, in the validation network, if there is a large number of validators, greater than 50% of them would have to collude to be able to do this. So that is the first wisdom of the masses or integrity of the masses. Second, you could say, sure, maybe 51% of them will collude and take away the money of the remaining 49%. This is where the systems of incentives come in. The moment such a thing were to happen, that is 50.1% of the people collude to rob the remaining 49.9, what are they robbing? They are robbing that digital asset. The moment that digital asset loses its integrity, the value of what they rob becomes zero, because now nobody wants to buy a coin which can be stolen. So the fact that they held 51% to begin with, that 51% also goes to zero. So these 51% actually will guard it with their life and prevent this from happening. So the fact that it is distributed, as well as the fact that you have an incentive to not allow this to happen, is the reason the system has worked.
Right. So this is the 51% attack. And you're saying the likelihood of a 51% attack taking place in both system is minuscule.
There would be only one situation in which it could
Mm.
happen, other than the fact that, of course, the network was so small that I or you and I put together could constitute 51%. So I'm leaving that small network aside because that has happened a couple of years ago. But if it
Mm.
were to happen to one of the major coins today, right, and I don't
Mm.
want to name any coin when I'm talking of a hack, it would have to be something at the level of US military computers, NASA computers, or several countries putting all their computers together and doing it at huge cost to themselves, which means hurting themselves economically
Right.
because they want to derail a particular network. It would take something at that scale. And just by the way, in the year 2018, somewhere around, I would say the mid of 2018, when I was uh, part of a exchange, we had actually hired a IIT Bombay electrical engineering professor to
Mm.
actually mathematically and engineering wise model this understanding for the Bitcoin network. So I actually have a paper which,
Mm.
when this gets published, if you it's open source and it's
Mm.
non-commercially non-based. If you want to give a download link for that for somebody who's technically inclined and would like to study how this entire thing works in the context of Bitcoin, I would be very happy to share that with you.
Yeah, we'll definitely be, I think, able to accommodate that. My last question, Mr. Khurana, what are gas fees? We hear it all the time uh, in context with crypto. What does it have to do with proof of stake or proof of work?
So what happens is that if I send you 100 rupees,
Mm.
in that same, I have to pay the water department. There is a cost of this transaction. The bank may levy that cost on you and say, if you're sending 100 rupees, I'm going to charge you 0.5%, or I'm going to charge you 1 rupee. Or they may choose not to levy you and make an economic reward by earning interest on your money. But there's a cost of transmission of money, regardless of method: payment wallet, UPI, cryptocurrency. Now, because the bank has multiple models of gaining income, while the crypto people have, the people who are validating have only one model, which is mining. This money has to necessarily be collected from people who are sending the crypto. So if you are sending me 100 rupees worth of Bitcoin, you will be charged a certain fee. This used to be called mining fee when it was Bitcoin. Ethereum came and changed its jargon to call it gas fee. Effectively, what all of this means is the fee required to mine, or the fee required to give energy, that is power this transaction, hence gas fee. The collection of all of this gas fee is what miners earn as their economic reward.
Mr. Ajeet Khurana, thanks so very much for your expertise today, for explaining to us what proof of work and proof of stake is. Proof of work comes with its own sets of advantages. It comes still at a growing environmental cost. Proof of stake avoids the massive energy consumption of proof of work. But I think there's still some way to go to prove that it is secure and stable at scale. Thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.